All right, thanks, Marshall. Welcome, everyone, to today's office hours. I'll be your host. My name is Gary Gerwer. I believe Angela is going to be driving, so we'll have our screen displayed. So as we have questions that talk about specific things, we'll try to point you to where they're at or where you can find them or in the documentation, then that'll be on screen.
So good afternoon from hot and sunny Sacramento. This is actually our last Friday open office hours for Calpads. We're going to scale back to just Mondays and Wednesdays starting next week. We'll announce that to everybody else as well. And in terms of other updates, since we met on Wednesday, we had an email from CDE saying that Calpads is going to be offline all weekend. So good news, bad news there. We all get a break. And the fix that's going in is one that's long awaited. It was the one that it's a two-parter where it was causing the duplicate program records. And then the second part of it is the data cleanup that's going to run over the weekend. So that's happy news. CDE sent out their first weekly update on Wednesday. So that's apparently going to be a thing. Every Wednesday, they're going to send out that. Share my screen. I believe I have it open somewhere. There it is. So just the weekly activity from one week to the next, which will be nice. I think that's good for us to see. And then the last thing I know everybody's waiting to hear is the fixes coming on Friday. And this is the list that we are expecting to go in on Tuesday around noontime. And I think it's pretty complete. Sometimes they sneak things in there on me, but I think this is everything.
That's a nice one with the STAS 313 because people haven't been able to get their data up there. So some good ones in there this time. Well,
yeah,
every time.
Yeah, and I'm happy about that one. This anomalies one was bothering me. I was worried people were merging the wrong kids because it looked like they were identical and they may not have been. Okay, so I'll leave that up on the screen. And Gary, you want to start taking some questions?
Yes, I will start reading the questions. A lot of those fixes are going in, but this week, Angela and I have been busy writing a
that's a good point, Gary. I should probably point that out, that things aren't quite as stable as we would like. So Kyron just updated this at 3 o'clock. So yes, this is hot off the press, and the date escalated will tell you how new it is. And so you can see that Gary and I have been logging quite a few this week. So again, that's always available in the footer of Calpads, and it's updated 3 or 4 times a day.
Angela and I have a competition, I think, but it's not my favorite kind of competition to see who can write the most bugs every day. Hopefully this will end sometime soon. All right, let's go on the questions. So first question is from, well, Yadira says, Martha's back. Hope you had a good vacation. Martha said it was a great vacation. Doug says, students that are reclassified after the last date of enrollment for the current year. I know that this has been asked and answered before. However, I am being asked for the documentation. Can you point me to the documentation, FAQ, documentation, or other that explains the process?
It was a flash.
Yes, it was. And I just had it open recently.
It's like 207 or something like that.
And Doug, it just really depends on whether or not the student's going to be returning to your LEA or not.
So it had this nice chart in there to help you figure out what dates to use and what happens when you use a given date. And I'll put that in chat for you, Doug.
So it was 219.
This is the 219 that was revised, right?
Okay. Because there was a 219 first version and then a revised version.
Yeah.
So the one on the website, I think, is the CD's revised version.
I mean, bottom line is that in order for the student, a reclassified student, a student that was reclassified outside of the enrollment, in order for that RFEP to reflect, the date actually has to fall within an enrollment period. I mean, that's the bottom line. Otherwise, the student's not going to show up on the report.
Are you there, Gary?
Yeah, I was just scrolling down looking for another question. There's a lot of dialogue about the t-shirt from Ethan. And I see down to Carol here. Can we please warn everyone to not combine mids based on the info on the mid page? The target and matching demographics do not show the demo data from each SSID, but just repeats the target data in the matching field, guardians, birthplace, etc. You really have to bring up each SSID to check to avoid an incorrect merge. Any ETA for when this will be fixed?
So some good news there, Carol. I agree with you. That is a dangerous bug, and it is closed, and it's going to be in production on Tuesday around noontime.
Woohoo!
Kelly asks, if an incoming student is going to attend summer school and needs to be EL tested, do we need to enroll him for 1 day in school for the current year? And if so, does he need to be enrolled in class, in a class?
Well, you shouldn't be enrolling the student in the current academic year to give them the initial, well, if they're not going to be enrolling till next year, you should submit a pre-enrollment. But what I would ask you to do is read Flash 219. Flash 219 gives lots of information about exactly what's needed in order to test students. Now, if the student needs to take the initial LPAC now, because they enrolled now, although most schools are out already, then you could go ahead and submit an enrollment record now. But I think you're talking about next year. So Flash 219 gives you lots of information.
And I posted that one in the chat.
Right. Oh, Scott says, no question, just my last Calpads meeting, moving on, but not retiring.
Oh,
Okay, Scott.
Best regards, Scott. You know how to get a hold of us if we can help you out.
Calpads chasing you away.
Oh. Stephanie asks, I found 2 students who were incorrectly merged as a mid. I created a new SSID for our student to correct this. How do we get the IFEP SELA record moved to the new SSID? Create a ticket with you or ask my assessment department to create a stairs. This is causing a cert 67.
so go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, you should be able to add the IFEP record, right?
No, well, you can't add an IFEP. You can add an RFEP.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sorry. I was mixed up. Go ahead.
So Barry, could you just read the question? Because I joined a little late, so I didn't see the.
Oh, you didn't see the question. She had 2 students that were incorrectly merged as a mid. She created a new SSID for the student to correct it, and now wants to add an IFEP SELA record to the new SSID. And she wants to know how to do that.
So number one, it depends on when this happened. So my assumption is that it was done in the current administration year, which now is over. And so your testing window is probably over. So you're going to have to submit a ticket on this, because just know that if you're trying to create an English language acquisition status or have a status sent over for a student under the wrong SSID, Calpads, we're actually going to have to do a back-end data request to add the record for you after we confirm with ETS.
Kim asked
I'm sorry, Gary. So she should put in a ticket and ask for you, Brandy?
Yeah. Yes. that would be advisable.
Okay. So Kim asks, for students who are homeschooled and qualify for special education services, do we treat them as private school students even if the parent doesn't have a private school affidavit?
Yes. Although, you know, I would encourage the parent to file a private school affidavit, although they can only do that between October 1st and October 15th annually.
Question from North Valley Animal Disaster Group.
It's Mary Masters.
Oh.
she forgot to change her login.
Okay. Looking for guidance on expulsion dates when A, the hearing was not held until after the last day of school, and B, when the return date is in the next school year.
So number one, remember that you're reporting the incident based on the date the incident occurred and not the date of the incident result. Okay, so you're reporting an incident that occurred, and based on which academic year that incident occurred, you would report the particular result. So we do not have any sort of validation between expulsions and like the student absence summary. But we do have validations between suspension and the absence summary. So this should not be an issue.
Okay. From Mara, a lot of our schools are coding cell phone use as disruption defiance. So they're getting reported since disruption defiance is an ed code offense. But I remember someone saying at a recent Q&A that cell phone use is not an ed code offense. Could I get some online documentation for this to show my schools, or should it still be an ed code offense since it could be defiance since they know they shouldn't use cell phones at school? Same goes with dress code violations. Thanks. Yeah, it was Brandy last week, I think, said something.
That was
about
me.
This.
Yep. So ultimately, Mara, it's up to the discretion of your administrators. So for example, if a student brings a cell phone to school, is it an ed code offense? I mean, your administrators might say repeated cell phone violations would constitute defiance. Ultimately, it's up to your administrators, but here's what I will tell you. That particular ed code is very contentious, okay, which is why you cannot suspend or expel any student. Well, you cannot suspend students in K-8 solely for that, right? And you cannot expel students K-12 just for that, specifically because it's very gray, right? So number one, it's up to your administrators. And the only time you should actually be reporting that offense is when that student was actually suspended or expelled as a result of that. And if you're doing that, it needs to be in conjunction with something else. It cannot just be that because that's against the law. Dress code violations, same thing, right? You're coding it as defiance or disruption. You're suspending them because of dress code violations, and you're coding it as defiance or disruption. That's actually against the law for students in kindergarten through 8th grade.
Okay. Angelina asked, I hit enter too fast. I ran a CELA, then checked the CELA conflict in, oh, that was from the Q1 we have, okay. I ran a CELA, then checked the CELA conflict in Aries. I only had 2 errors, which was great. My question is, the EL start date was different in Calpads and Aries. I checked Calpads and there are 4 different EL start dates in 4 different schools. Does it matter which one is populated by the CELA and uploaded into our system?
For reconciliation purposes, I would use the one with the greatest effective start date, the most recent effective start date. That's what I would use that record. Because that's what, if you're wanting to reconcile with Calpads, that's what should be entered. So that's what we're using.
Shelley says, I'm working on a Chromebook today. I normally save the chat or transcript, but I do not have that option here. I would really appreciate they were shared at the end of this meeting.
I will
Marshall,
do that.
can
Yes,
you
I
send
will
it to
do
Shelley?
that. Yeah, I will.
Kay asks, is there a problem with the STAS counting an in-school suspension as an absence? I keep getting fatal errors on these.
In-school suspensions are not absences.
But we do have
But-
some defects on the STAS 313, right?
Yes.
And I thought we saw Aries had a bug on the something with the STAS.
Well, Kay's right. The change in the way the in-school suspension is calculated has affected their submissions. Like Brandy said, it's a part of your attendance days, but the way the IVRs, if you read a description, in particular the STAS 0309, they're going to take the expected attendance days and then subtract the attendance days, and then it calculates how many days are left, and then it identifies your absences are greater than how many days are left. So you still got to use the error list and read it carefully, and it'll tell you how it's calculated. But as Martha was alluding to, we know for one, Aries hasn't made the adjustment from the previous year. So now the in-school suspension days are their own bucket and added in calculations, where in previous years they were identified, but they were accounted for in part of the days attended. So that change is reoccurring. So I think that's what Kay's issue is.
Thanks, Nate. Marcy asks, for the work-based learning file, what time period is it supposed to cover? Is it just for the current school year, or should it cover all work-based learning for the students' full 9th through 12th grade years?
So for the majority of the work-based learning programs, Marcy, it's reflective of what happened in the current academic year. However, there are a couple programs specifically for students with disabilities, codes 60 and 65, which is the transition work experience programs and then the classroom-based work exploration. Those two should not be submitted until the student actually meets the requirements. So for example, if the student has been in a work exploration course for, 2 years, then at the completion of that, because I believe that the requirement, oh gosh, I'm going to hate myself if I say that I believe it's 4 semesters. 4 semesters of classroom-based work exploration. So once they complete 4 semesters, then you would submit up that work-based learning code. So, but for the others, it's, what, for internships, for example, what are the hours that they completed within that academic year?
So Brandy, when they go to use that data in the dashboard, they're going to look at all 4 years, right? They're not just looking at the most recent year to use that data. So that's why you can do it all at once, or you can do it as they complete it.
Right, right.
Okay, at 3:11, Angela posted Flash 219. There's a comment to Martha about her vacation and wondering where she went. Nancy asks, on the STEM, I'm getting errors STEM 111 and STEM 115, which are warnings. Do I need to delete those records from the file and send the STEM back up? Staff demographics. These will not be fixed until the staff retired. Do I have to delete the records every time I want to send up an STEM file?
Shouldn't be getting warnings at input anymore.
Warning should be a data discrepancy, right? Shouldn't happen on input. Oh, look at that.
What is this?
Start date less than birth date.
My mind is just exploding. This isn't supposed to happen.
Well, I guess in the file, the birth date, and then you have a staff start date. So
I did see
I don't
Summer.
think it's warning.
Yeah,
It'll fail the.
it should fail the whole file, but she says morning too. I saw
Could be a
Summer's on.
bug.
Summer, if you want to send me a direct message if you know anything about that. 111 and
115.
I'm wondering if they're bugs and that's why she's getting them, right? Because it makes sense to do it on input because you're just interrogating the
It's
record
kind of
that's
the same
coming
thing.
in.
Yeah, they probably should say fatal, right?
They're making sure the staff is old
No.
enough to work, I
If they
guess.
say fatal, then it has to be a data discrepancy as well. And so I think it's appropriate to be on input. Anything on input fails the record or fails the file.
Either way, I think I'd like a ticket on that so we could get to the bottom of it. So if you could have put in a ticket and ask for Angela, please.
Swanzetta says, hello all. On the last Q&A, someone asked about what type of weapon was pepper spray. I think Martha said it was 30 other firearm. Our district has been using 40 other weapon, but I just wanted to verify that 30 is correct. If so, I will need to change my training documentation. Thanks.
I thought it was in the code set where it said propellant and propellant.
Right.
It did, Martha, but I think we missed the second line. In the chat, I kind of submitted a private message to the person who asked the question. I think it has to be projected through an incendiary or something like that. I think the second line in that code, you can read it.
A propellant charge of more than 4 sources, a missile, a mine. Wow, we got bombs going off.
But it says including any weapon which will or is designed or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of any explosive. So somewhere in there it also said incendiary. So I don't think pepper spray is propelled by an explosive.
I would agree. So I withdraw my comment from the last Q&A. Propellant or pepper spray should be other weapon. Do you concur, Brandy?
Yeah.
The ayes have it. Swanzetta, you got the correction.
So you don't have to train your training you don't have to change your training documentation. Fabiola asks, is the formula for chronic absenteeism going to count the incomplete independent study as absences?
Yes. And by the way, that's not new. Incomplete independent study days were included in the chronic absenteeism calculation last year. So.
Stephanie, if a pre-registered kindergarten student has a parent request SPED testing now, how do we enter an enrollment to match the testing or meeting date?
So Stephanie, Flash 207, I believe, has very, very detailed information about how you record meetings where the plans won't be effective until the following year. So I would read Flash 207, and I think it's 207. Yes. So it's the second section, guidance for meetings being held for plans and services that won't be effective until the subsequent academic year. So I would read that. If you have other questions, then you can reach out with a ticket. You can put my name on it. It's fine.
Okay. Fabiola, I see your question too. We'll circle back. Rebecca posted some links for Doug. Kay has a question too. Carol has a question too. Mary has a question too. Oh, it's a question two time. A lot of question twos. We'll come back to those. Marcy, info for question 1. PowerSchool is extracting all work-based learning records for each year, but listing them as 2021-22 reporting year for the current extract. This is for internships. They have no way to enter the year the internship was done in their student information system, and they say that is correct, but it didn't seem right to me. I'll pass along your info. Thanks, Brandy. I'll follow up to the question. Okay.
Yeah, and for internships specifically, Marcy, I just wanted to clarify. Right now, internship information is not being included in the dashboard, and that's because the Accountability Office is still gathering data to do some sort of analysis. So for internships, what you should be reporting is whether or not a student participated in the internship and the number of hours they spent external to the school day on that internship, right? And so what they're doing is they're looking to see the lowest end and the highest end of what students did over an academic year or a series of academic years. And when they've come up with some sort of measure for how many hours participating in an internship would equal some sort of criteria towards being prepared, you know, they will publicize that. They just haven't done it yet. So internships is annual data.
Okay. Ethan has a comment. He doubts pepper spray is going to have a barrel bore greater than 1/2 inch.
No idea what that means, but okay.
I didn't either, Brandy.
It's the size of the projectile. Kyron posted at 3:30 something. I'm not sure what.
Is it safe for work, Kyron? I didn't click on it.
No, it's just a GIF about concurring.
Okay, I'm going to go back and go to the Q2s.
Fabiola at 319 is the first one.
Oh, thank you. Since students have to be enrolled for more than 31 days to count for chronic absenteeism, do they have to be enrolled for more than 31 days to count for cumulative enrollment?
That's in the dashboard guide, right? What the rules are?
For cumulative enrollment or for chronic absenteeism?
For either, I thought. I thought cumulative enrollment regardless. We just count what the cumulative enrollment is. So even if you're there one day, we're going to count you for one day, but whether or not the dashboard uses that because you're there for a day, that's another story. And the dashboard tells you. The dashboard technical guide gives you info on that. So I think even if they're for one day, they're in the cumulative enrollment count. Correct, Brandy?
I believe so. And the reason I hesitate is because the Data Reporting Office is actually the entity that compiles the cumulative enrollment counts for use in the dashboard. So, but I do believe if a student was enrolled for one day, they are included in the cumulative enrollment because it's used for more than just chronic absenteeism.
Okay, next question 2 is from Kay. So dress code violations at the high schools could constitute a 511 disruption defiance since the grade level is 9 through 12. I got so confused, I even did a Google search and found court cases that said it was violation of freedom of speech.
You know what, Kay, I can't answer that question for you. Again, defiance and disruption is a very broad section of ed code. And so your administrators, obviously the sections of ed code are suspendable or expellable offenses. Okay, and so someone is specifically this 48900K has to be up to the discretion of the administrator. So if you ask me as a parent whether my kid should be suspended because of a dress code violation, I would say no, that's dumb. Just me personally as a parent. But again, you know, it could be repeated violations, and you know, it's up to the administrator. and 48,900K is really broad, but that's why, again, there are some laws that prevent suspending kids, particularly in early grades, for those offenses.
Okay. Carol says, shoot, now I'm confused again. If expected days attended is 180 and there are no absences but 2 in-school suspension, is the days attended 178 or 180? And it's 178 because the in-school suspensions are not included in the days intended. They're separate counts. So you add that separate. The two,
right.
Yeah.
And so the reason that happened, folks, is because now days attended is days attended in person, right? And even though the in-school suspension days, they are actually there in person, it's just not included. So yeah, it is separate.
And the CFS for days attended actually has a sentence, because I've been using it in a lot of tickets, that specifically spells that out. Mary's question 2 or follow-up regarding Nate's answer. Angela's bringing up the CFS. And there you see field 3.16.
3.18, right?
Well, for days attended, because I think they're confused. It says, for days attended in person, do not include days a student is not in the regular classroom for an entire school day due to an in-school suspension, because this is calculated or collected separately.
On 3.18, and then they're added together to get the total expected days.
Yes. Mary's follow-up regarding Nate's answer, stats calculation. I'm not sure I understand if you're saying that Aries extract is causing bad data and where to fix it, or if we are to ignore the error. Is Aries, because it was a change, I think Aries used to include it in there, and are they still doing that, or have they taken that out now?
Still on their known issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're aware. Angela has the known issues up.
This is the Aries support desk.
So hopefully that gets taken care of soon. Kim asks, if a student is out on medical leave and temporarily homeschooling, do we leave them on plan type 100 IEP or use their regular school of attendance in the reporting fields?
So Kim, it's the entity that's going to be responsible for reporting the ADA for the student. So in answer to your first question, do you leave them on their IEP? The answer is yes, because temporarily homeschooled is either one of two things. Either it's home hospital, which there's a specific type of ADA for, or they're on sort of an independent study program per their IEP. So yes, they would remain on an IEP because they're not in private school, technically. But in terms of who reports the ADA, that's probably something you'd have to check with the attendance folks, and not, I'm taking your local attendance folks for that particular student.
Okay. Okay, that's question 3. Is the link between discipline suspension days and STAS a two-way street or just a one-way? The STAS checking for OSS and out of school suspension and in-school suspension, but the discipline is not checking the days on the STAS.
That's correct. It is one way, right? So the only time you're going to get some sort of validation is when you've told us in the staff that there are in-school suspension days and out-of-school suspension days. If you've told us that, but you haven't reported any discipline incidents, you're going to get an error. But it does not work the other way, right? Because in a lot of cases, you know, it's less than a day, right? And for some of you in the staff, you're reporting at least one full day. So the validation only goes one way.
Kathy wrote, Aries is working on the change to adjust the stats file now. It should ship ASAP.
Great. Thanks for the update, Kathy. Did we skip Ethan at 3:36?
Oh, I was looking for Q2s. I didn't notice there was another Q1 added. Sorry, Ethan. If a 12th grade student meets the state's minimum grad requirements as per code 51225.3, but not the local school grad requirements, but will not be returning next year, so completing grade 12, do we have to use the completion status 360, or is it the school's discretion and 100 would be allowed? Barrel bore comment was about the weapon ed code you had on the screen. Oh yeah.
I gathered that much, Ethan. I just didn't know what a barrel bore was. I think Brandy's the same boat.
Okay, so Ethan, this is a question we actually had to pose. So what he's talking about is students that qualified for a high school diploma under AB 104. So AB 104 allowed students that were in 11th grade last year who were credit deficient to meet the state minimum graduation requirements this year as 12th graders, and they could issue them a diploma. So we did put guidance out, we did pose that question to our legal office, and I think one of the issues is that the federal definition of a graduate is a student who receives a diploma that a preponderance of the students in the district receive. So in this case, you have to decide what preponderance is. So bottom line is we don't have any official guidance that I can point to. So I would defer to your local legal counsel as well as your administrators when you're coding the exits for these particular kids, because we do not have any concrete legal guidance, even though they did issue an opinion, but it was full of other questions. So
Jessica asked, if a student that is 18 years old and has received a certificate of completion in 2021 and was attending our adult transition program and has moved, how do we report his leave code? Would it be self-withdrawal? Thank you.
Let's see.
Is that the SPED exit code? Is that what the question
Yeah,
is?
but they were in transition service, so they didn't totally, even though they got the certificate of completion. That's an interesting twist on things, huh?
Yeah, I mean, bottom line, Jessica, is that technically that student is eligible for services until they age out at 22. They were in a transition program. So with respect to what you submit to Calpads, if you have some sort of documentation indicating that the student is self-withdrawing, then you could report it as a 78.
Would they need to, Brandy? Would just exiting the student with the E230 120 and leaving the SPED record alone? Is that an option?
So they had already submitted a 120 in 2021.
And so when they finish out the year in adult transition and they don't expect them to return, what would be the exit code?
E125, right?
Yeah, you could use E25 for the enrollment exit code. But if I understand her question, she's asking whether or not the leave, I'm assuming leave code is in
The SPED record?
And if it is, but just realize that kid, there has to be some documentation. Here's why I'm saying this. The parent or the student leaves the district, right? They moved, but they could go to another district and be eligible for transition services in that district until they age out. right? So exiting them from the special education program basically says that that student doesn't want services anymore. So I would just ask you to just get documentation from the student saying, okay, you're moving and you don't want to be served anymore.
Brandy, does it cause any problems in the local sped system if they leave it open, but they close out their enrollment record?
I don't know. You know, I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, they could exit them in the SIS. But
Tara from Placer County, SOPA, I think, just said in the SEDS program, there would be no need to exit the student from special ed since he moved. You would use code 76, which is not reported to Calpads.
oh, that is the move code. You're right, Kara. That's right. You're correct.
Report it to Calpads though.
Transferred. Yeah, it doesn't get reported to Calpads. Right.
Anne says, Brandy, me no comprehendo. What is preponderance?
Preponderance. I know. Okay. Here's what I will say about this. You've recorded them as high school graduates. Right now, we have no way to make the distinction. Let me leave it at that. We can't tell. So the answer to your question is not if you don't tell me about it, and
Mary says, is a student eligible for services if they were already issued a standard high school diploma?
no. So once a student graduates with a standard high school diploma, they are no longer eligible to generate average daily attendance, and they're no longer eligible for IDEA funding. If the district chooses to serve them, they're serving them on their own dime.
That would make a really great FAQ.
I was just thinking, I think it would be even better in the SPED document that's supposed to be coming out 3 years later.
It is 3 years later.
Where does time go?
Just saying, Brandy, you know, you're going to have a little pain up front getting it out, but then your life will be much easier when we don't have to bother you all the time. Get some of that stuff out of your head and on a piece of paper for us.
You're absolutely right.
Lou has the definition of preponderance. It's a noun, the quality or fact of being greater in number, quantity, or importance. And that is the bottom of the questions. It's 350 and 100 degrees in Sacramento right now.
Oh,
how's it in the city, Martha? Is it nice and cool down there?
Yes, it is. It was warm coming in, but it's almost 80.
Tara has a question. I'm getting questions about the California dashboard. If I'm trying to understand where the numbers are coming from, who assists with that? The Calpads folks or the dashboard folks?
I would say you can assist with that because the CDE creates a dashboard technical guide. So when they publish the 21-22 numbers, they'll also publish a dashboard technical guide, and then that will explain all of the calculations. So it's worthy looking at the 2019, which was the last time they published numbers, and get familiar with all of the different buckets, because there's a lot of data on that dashboard.
And then Rebecca
also
posted a link to a Google Doc that she created. She's good at that stuff.
And you know, if you do go to CD's website, you can just type in the dashboard technical guide and it'll bring it up. The crosswalk is helpful to know what data in Calpads ends up in the dashboard. But if you want to know exactly the calculations, like even for the testing stuff, participation rates, that's in the technical guide.
Do you know why they call it morro, by the way? I
No.
just figured it out. So morro means nose in Spanish. And if you map, it's shaped like a nose.
Did you know that there was 7 of them? There's 7 big rocks. They aren't all on the coast, but there's a group of them. They call them sisters. So it's
Oh, I
not
did
just
not
the
know.
one in Morro Bay. There's other ones.
I'm looking up how to get there. my daughter,
You know,
my daughter's in town in July, so I'm like, yeah, it's a great place to go.
what was really cool too, when you go to the rock and you can walk around one side of it, there's a whole bunch of rocks that have broken off the big rock, and people have been stacking them. So it was really cool. You saw a whole bunch of, and I don't know if you guys seen that with, you know, a big rock and then another big rock, and it, you know, 10 rocks stacked on top of each other. There was like, I don't know, over 100 of those stacks out on this, you know, point from the big rock. That was kind of cool to see.
It's cool.
Yeah, at 3:54, Rebecca has some cheat sheets for you, and then at 3:55, Angela posted the link to the dashboard handbook and asked a question. Sorry, brain overflow again. I'm trying to read Flash 207, and it goes on for miles. So I just want to know, should I request SSIDs for SPED students before they start school in the fall or not?
It depends on what you're doing. So you can. It just depends. So if you want like specific help and specific guidance, then just send in the ticket with my name on it, and I can call and kind of walk you through it. But all the steps are actually in that document.
So what are some key categories of why you would get a SSID early for a SPED student?
Well, okay. So here's an example. You have a kid who's going to be entering kindergarten, right? So they're not enrolled this year, right? But you want to hold their meeting, okay? So, but the plan won't be effective until next year. Well, what you have to do is you have to submit up an enrollment. If you want to reflect the meeting, you want to submit up the enrollment, you want to submit up the SPED record, but then you're going to have to no-show that enrollment because the student is not enrolled in your school, right? They're not there. Another example is a student that is currently in a private school, who's going to be coming to public school the next year. So again, the student is not enrolled in your LEA. So you can either submit the enrollment now and the SPED record, or you can wait until the subsequent year, because what ends up happening is that student gets reflected on your end of year report. And in some cases, particularly when a student's changing from an IEP to an ISP or vice versa, what you really want to report in this current academic year is the plan that the student is on now and will be on through the end of the academic year. Okay, so if I know that a student is going to move to an ISP in the next year, but I hold their meeting now, what's going to show up on the end of year reports is the fact that the student's on an ISP and they're not, right? So you have to decide whether or not you want that information reflected in end of year 4, or you want to wait to submit those enrollments. That's the reason
Brandy, we relaxed the SPED ownership a little bit, right? It's in the summer, you can submit a SPED record without an overlapping enrollment.
Yes, you can. They're in summer months.
At 3:57, Marshall posts the chat. Kara says, are summer months June and July only for SPED ownership?
It's like June, July, August, if I'm reading that correctly. So it's only requiring that that you have a corresponding enrollment if it's between September and May. 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Again, this is our last Friday office hours, but we will be back on Monday for more. And we'll get CDE to send a note out to everybody, letting people know we scaled back a little bit. Try to stay cool if you're like us in the valley here. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for your participation. And thank you, Marshall, Brandy, Martha, Gary, everyone. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye.